Hey everyone, how's it going? So welcome to Read Up My Ride, welcome to episode 5, and as always, a massive thank you guys for all of your support, your subscriptions, your interacting, your comments, all of the stuff that you do is helping the YouTube algorithm suggest this series to other people as well. So a massive thank you to everything that you guys are doing. And if you are new here, welcome aboard. So this is a series where you guys submit your blueprints of your parks, your rides and everything, your areas to me. I then go on and add Realism using my experience of working for a theme park company and also way too many hours in Planet Coaster. So details on how you can submit your blueprints and everything, as always, are in the comments below. But should we check out today's project? This is the park that we're in today then. It's submitted by Adam Green. So Adam, thank you so much for this park. There are already a few videos of this park out on YouTube, so I'll find them and I'll put them in the description and everything below. And Adam's asked me to inject some realism into the Log Flume area that's sitting at the back here. So before we check that out, let's have a look at the rest of the park. And this is an absolute beauty of a park. It's a park that's already starting to utilise some of those aspects that we talk about in our Reel Up videos. I would love to take credit for Adam coming along and adding all of these after watching the episodes, but I don't think I can. This is a project that definitely predates this series, but it actually brings all of the 4 episodes that we've done so far, it brings it all to life. So this is why I wanted to showcase this park more than anything else. I'm getting a couple of vibes from this, and I've had a chat with Adam about inspiration and everything, and there's one very clear. Thorpe Park is an inspiration in the sense of the way that it's laid out and the way that it's interacting with coasters and interacting with other rides and everything. But there's also an element of Chessington World of Adventures in here as well. Now, I know we don't have zoos and we don't have, like, Chessington itself as a park doesn't have the scale of rides and everything that we've got in this park, but the way that the park is laid out is very similar in the sense you've got backstage areas that are right in the middle of premium space. And so in future updates, I'm going to talk about that because that's going to quite nicely bring to life our principles that we were talking through in episode 3 for guest flow and management and everything. But we've got this amazing ticket area that's already starting to come together. So you've got like a security checkpoint area where you have to go through, have your bag checked. And we're already starting to think of signage. We're already starting to think of guest access. We're starting to think of disabled access. We're starting to think of staff access. We're also starting to think of things like your first aid, your guest services, your ticket booths. It's really well put together, this area. I really like this area. It's nice and open. You've got really good guest flow coming through here, and they would come into this main area here, and then this is where you hit your first rides. And then we've got this queue that's, again, it's adjacent to the path, so you've got all those contact areas that we were talking about in episode 3, where if you needed to evacuate the queue, you could just put an emergency point anywhere in here and you could just get them out. But then straight away you've got this first ride that's right in front of you, and then you've got this beautiful sightline of this coaster in the background, a Mack launch coaster, I believe, that's using the Copperhead Strike trains. Then we come through here, and we're looking again at some more sort of decorating and some more detailing that we've got going on, so the jailhouse. And then we come across to the entrance of our coaster, Oris, I think you pronounce it. I think I've just probably butchered that. But we are, again, consistent theming with the coaster. This area has a very strong brand. It's very well put together. It's nice and open. And you've also separated your entrance and your exit. You're leaving via a gift shop, I believe, which is in here. So it's, really impressive. You're already thinking about your backstage areas, so your clutter. You've got your power generators. You're thinking about bins. You're thinking about how you hide this away from everybody. You're thinking about your access points, your emergency. You probably just sign there, but shh. That's awful, wasn't it? Yes, you're thinking about your staff access. You're thinking about what you've got in your station. So there's your baggage areas and stuff. And then we come around to our lovely B&M. Again, you've got this backstage area access, stuff only. And look at this sightline. This is so good. It comes so close to the path, and you're covering it off in a safety manner with your fences, and then you come through underneath. I think it's the queue line. And it's very uninspired, but that's the beauty of this park. Like, it's just a concrete pad. There's no real I don't want to say there's no real effort, because there's effort, like there's a lot of effort, but I mean it's effortless in the sense of it doesn't need it. It's really effective as it is. It doesn't need the vegetation to filter this out or fill it out or anything. It does a brilliant job of doing it as it does already. And then we open up into this other area, and this, well, I'm not going to show you anything to do with it, because the last video that was released of this park was a teaser of this attraction, so I'm not touching this, because I don't think this episode is going to go out before that episode, so no spoilers, but this is good. And then we come through to the area that we're actually going to be doing today. So we've got this we've got this these dodgems that are sitting here, and chatting with Adam about this area. It's designed this way. It's supposed to be very solitary. It's supposed to be on its own. I like the fact that you're thinking about your disabled access coming from your Log Flume area down. So this is a disabled lift, and you've got some steps. So you're already thinking about this idea of your guest flow and how you're going to get guests around. So when I attack this Log Flume, which I'll go into in a minute, there's a couple of assumptions that I'm going to make with this park. I'm going to assume, and I don't know whether it's rightly or wrongly, that there's going to be a second entrance somewhere, a little bit like Chessington does, only because that sort of clears up why you've got so many backstage areas and such prime spots. Is if you had a second entrance, that means then you can bring a path around this way and join up this entrance, and bring guests down this way and down to your new key rides that you've got at the back of the park. So that's the assumption that I'm going to be doing. It's a couple of design requests that Adam has given me for this ride, so it's very much borrowing from Loggers Leap at Thorpe Park. So I'm going to be taking out all of this station and making it more Western themed. Very much borrowing as much as I possibly can from that. So we need to be designing it and making it look as much like Loggers Leap as possible is essentially the design brief that I've got here. But I would also like to incorporate the Insanity Ride, and I would like to somehow bring this this Dodgems into this area as well. I still want it to be solitary. Think of along the lines of at Thorpe Park, where you've got the teacups and the stealth area. Teacups aren't part of the stealth area, but they're integrated in the way that the pathing and everything's put together. So think along those lines. And then we've just got this area that we're going to put in. So we're going to need some retail space. We're going to need some facilities. We're going to need to do a bit of work, a bit of terrain work that we can do. Not going to change the layout of the Log Flume at all. I'm going to remain loyal to the layout of the Log Flume. Just add the realism in the sense of the pumps and everything, but we'll do that in the first update. So I'm going to crack on and make a start on this area, and I will see you for the first one. So here we go. So we like a good update, and here is our first one. So as you can see with this one, I started to reconfigure the area, and as always, the first part of the reeling up of any ride is to configure where you want all of your facilities, your paths, your shops and everything. You start to get a feel for the area, things like guest flow, that sort of stuff. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. I've started to lay out how I do the plazas, I've started to lay out how I do the shops and the queue, and starting to make a feature of this drop. We're actually dealing with quite a short flume ride, so that's actually quite nice to work with, in the sense that there's not really a lot to decorate around it. So we're going to need to focus more on the facilities and how that's going to work. I've also noticed as well within this park that we've got quite a backstage area here, and it's using primed space, which is quite rare. But this park does this particularly well in the sense that it then directs the public path through a ride, and you're forced to interact with that ride. So what I'm doing here is I'm starting to open up the possibility that if this backstage area were to be moved, you could put it here next door to the dark ride instead. And what this will then do is enable you to open up this area as a pathway that leads through here, and then you're not bottlenecking this pathway for guest flow. Remember back to what we said in episode 3 with the idea of guest flow, and in an emergency situation people will leave the way they know and not the way that's safe and that sort of stuff. So I'm opening up the possibility that we might want to move the backstage area, but it's not in any way, shape or form going to happen for definite. It's just something that I'm doing here to allow the space in case that's the decision that's made. It's my recommendation to move it, but it's no biggie if it's not moved. It's still working quite well. And so in terms of what I've done over here, I've started to lay down all of the pathing. I'm starting to make a real feature of this drop. So I had this idea of wanting a restaurant-y type fast food place that you can have here. And then you can have some decking that you can sit down and you can watch the drop of the actual flume itself. Now, I haven't changed anything to do with the flume other than the second rise, the second lift hill that we've got here. I've just merged it into the one, but the actual path itself is the exact same. The reason I've done that is just to allow some extra boats to improve the throughput, because the game doesn't allow you to have more boats if you've got a lift that's sort of here. So that's all I've done there. The one thing I have noticed though, and I do this in my parks as well, and I'm leaving this intentionally, is that this being sunk down so far, because of the way that the collision of the water works, the boats are flooded when they come into this area. But I'm going to leave this as it is because it was the intention of Adam to have it like this. So I'm just going to leave that way. The other thing that I'm doing in this area now is starting to plan the water flow. So if you remember back to the Rapids episode where we were talking about the principles of how the water travels around the ride, in the sense that station tends to be the highest area, that then has water pumped into the station area, it then flows down through the channels to the lowest point of the ride, which usually then ends up in a lift hill, and via the lift hill it would go via some kind of water treatment facility to keep it circulating, and then it goes up the lift hill and then it's back to the higher point. For log flumes, it works slightly different to that. You don't need to pump as much water around a channel because it's not built into the ground, and it's not so beefy in terms of the way that it's done. So what you tend to find, and this is probably a little bit overkill, but because of the size of the pieces that we're using for within Planet Coaster, we sort of have to make it this big. But what you tend to find is at the bottom of all of your lift hills, this is your lowest point of the ride, and so you would have like an escape water. Now we can't remove the side walls of the trough, unfortunately, to be able to make this more believable, but this would essentially be open, and what would then happen is all of the water that's flowing down this way would then flow into this sort of channel area here, and it would then be pumped up the lift hill. So you would have a pipe that sits underneath. In fact, we have got in the game here, so the water would be pumped up this pipe, and then it would be put back into this channel. The water would then flow around this way, and it's then pumped down the drop and into the pool below. And so that's what I'm starting to do here, is this element of the water table and the water flow. And we know that the station here is higher than this lift hill area, and so again you're going to want some kind of off spill here, because boats are going to back up, water's going to back up, so you need an off spill which comes into a bit of a slipway, and then that slipway feeds into this lower part, and this is essentially where you're also then going to find your water treatment plant in this sort of area. And then just for my own realism, I'm going to remove this by the time the ride is finished, but it's just to make sure that I've got everything in place that I need to. This would be your lowest point of the ride, right? This is where you're going to have your water collecting when the ride's not in use. So similar to the Rapids ride, you would have like a pool that would then expand, and then you just suck out the water from that pool to put it into the channels. And in order for us to be able to do that effectively, you're going to need some sort of plumbing that comes into this bottom pool. So what I'm doing here is I'm just laying down some pipe work to say, actually, this is pretty much a similar level. And so you would have a two-way water flow between these two elements. So you might have an inlet and an outlet somewhere in this pool. The inlet would take the water to the treatment, and then it would come back again. But what you then also may find is that when the ride is turned on in the morning, and it's probably a bit of a long shot, but when the ride is turned on in the morning, the water is then taken from this pool, it's then brought over to the water treatment plant and then pumped up the lift hill, and this is how the water then gets to the ride. I think that's probably a tall order. I think you're probably going to find it would more be pumped into this area. But either way, even if you were to pump it into the station, it's still going to end up in this bottom area here. So even if you were to want to fill this trough and this trough, you still have to bring the water through this lift hill. So that's why I've sort of made that decision, is that it's going to be pumped in this pool and put into here. And then the actual treatment facility you've got doesn't need to be as big either. So if you remember back to the Rapids one, we did quite a chunky building. This wouldn't need to be so big. This wouldn't need to be such a hefty backstage area. You'd have a power source, you'd have a small water treatment facility. I mean, the channels are much narrower, much thinner than the Rapids are, so you don't need as big, bulky equipment as you would do on a Rapids ride. I bet you know what this is going to be. It's pretty obvious what this is going to be at the end of at the exit of the ride. Then we're going to just have some kind of like kiosky type foody thing there. Maybe games instead, because we've got food here. I don't know. I know I definitely want to put something here, and then I've just rearranged the insanity right here. And then the other thing that I've done is I've rejigged this path a little bit. So I've opened up this area, so you've now got essentially 3 ramps. One's going to be stairs, one's going to be ramp for disabled access, and the other one's is shallow enough to just be a ramp in its own right. And then this is going to distribute your guests better than we had before, in the sense that this was a dead end area, but now we don't come to an end anymore. It's not a destination area, it's a thoroughfare. So you can walk through, you can come up to the flume here, and then you can walk back this way. But likewise, I've just brought the path a little bit more flush to the area, just to bring it in slightly, and it also then makes this disabled area make a little bit more sense, in the sense that it's on the side. But it also then opens up the possibility that the park may expand this way, and you can then bring a path around this way, and then you could bring a path around this way. So you're then distributing your guests a little bit more. So I'm not going to do that. That's down to Adam to do when he gets the park back, if that's what he chooses to do. But I'm just opening up that possibility. And then you've also got the connection to the backstage area, if that's going to stay. You've then got the entrance area here, and then you'd have easy access to the backstage area that we're creating for the flume. So that's where we're sitting at the moment anyway. So I'm going to carry on detailing. I'm going to carry on with this idea of facilities and starting to get everything pulled together. So I'll see you in the next update. Alright, so here we are with the second update, and there's been a few changes made to this one. It's all mainly been superficial changes that have been sitting all around the outside and the functionality of the area, rather than many cosmetic things. But we've got a station building, and we're starting to pull together the area quite nicely. So this is what I've been working on for the last couple of hours. I'm starting to pull together this idea of the terrain and how we want it to look. So this idea of Loggers Leap at Thorpe Park and the westerny style area lends itself quite nicely to rocks and to a lot of wood. So this is what I've been doing. I've just been lining off all of this rock work along here, which is going to come to life when you start putting vegetation and everything in this, when you start breaking up this almost repetitive rock face. But each rock is individually placed, individually rotated before it's placed, so no rock is ever placed in the same position twice. You may end up with some in the same position as you're rotating them throughout, but as I'm actually physically placing them, they're always rotated in some way, shape or form. I've also started to do this idea of the realism behind the maintenance, the escape routes and everything. So I've just added in the pump at the bottom of the first drop, or the open drop back, and that's really loud. So I've just added this pump in. I've added this second lake as well. When I was watching some POVs just to do some research and everything, you notice that a lot of the time there are overspill areas, and this would be a particular overspill area. And I know that we're accounting for it here because we've just got the spillway here that comes down into the treatment area. But I've also just added this lake here as well, just because it feels like this would be an overspill area. And what you would find here is there'd be lots of reeds and lots of vegetation, so it wouldn't be an obvious landscaped lake. It would be very overgrown, and the water just flows into there, and then it's sucked up from underneath here, and then it would connect from like this, the bottom of this lake here in the treatment centre. You would have some kind of spillway here. And what I'm also going to do is put waterfalls along here as well, just to bring this to life. But I've now started to think of guest sightline as they're on the ride itself. So we're looking at the first bend here. I've added in the hill just to give it a bit of variation, and then we've also got this shed almost that I've just pulled together. It's got a bit of an A-frame roof. It blocks the sight of the maintenance area as you're going through, and then you come out to the first drop. So I think this is probably a bit overkill for the size of the ride. This is pretty intense. But it's the width of the walkway, so the only other real way I can do this is by using the fence pieces to create that cross-hatching effect, but then the cross-hatching is too big. So the idea of this would be to catch all the rubbish that might be washed downstream, might be washed down the actual drop itself, so the leaves and whatever, then someone would come along and clean this. Whereas if I were to use the fences to get this effect, the holes would be too big, so you'd then lose that element of realism. So I'd rather have this too wide than not wide enough. But I need to do the touching up and the detailing along here and everything, so it just needs to be tidied up and cleaned up. Then we're looking at the drop itself, so I started to put in the pathing along the fence, the pathing along the side of the ride, the fences and the escape routes and everything that we've got here, and then you've also got an escape route at the bottom of the drop as well. Now you'd never really want to evacuate someone from this area, because it's always going to be in motion, it's always going to be travelling at speed. So the first opportunity you're really going to evacuate somebody is here at this first incline, or the re-incline if you like. And that's, I've just put the path in here, and then that then comes up to the queue line, and then you've just got an escape gate here. So you've got actual access. You wouldn't necessarily need vehicular access down here. It's not very much a big deal, you just need to have some kind of escape access, so that's all I've put in. And I've used the consistent fencing as well, just to keep that theme. Guests can still see it, but this is obviously going to be covered with vegetation as you're going along, so a lot of it will be hidden. And then I've just added the same shed just underneath the lift hill as well, just to protect it. It's going to be dripping and everything, but you're going to be able to distract the guests from all of this by using the waterfalls. And then I've just started to put another spillway in here as well, so I think this is where the waterfalls are going to be. And because it would, in game, it would sort of line up with the pipework that you've got here, and the pipework that's going underneath this lake that we're building, it feels like you would also have some kind of drainway in the bottom here at this point as well. And then station building itself needs all of its detailing doing, but the actual building itself is now pretty much done. I just need to put some support beams along this side, just to support this side roof. But this is what I've done on the inside. It's just your typical A-frame, not A-frame, your V-frames. Nothing particularly spectacular. And then I've just used the adventure wood for the roof, just because it gives you a little bit more control over how you're doing the actual roof itself. And then I've just done some queue covers. I think I stole this from Gardaland. It's sort of what they do on Colorado Boat, I think. So you've just got this idea of queue cover, and I've put them at an angle just because it creates a bit of a nice sight line. Nothing really particularly design specific about that. I mean, if it rains, all these people are going to get wet, and it's going to completely negate the fact that it's a cover, but it's fine. It does what it needs to do. Ride photo booth is coming along quite nicely. This is just going to be a generic hut. Over here then we've got the games stall, so I think I'm going to use the same technique I did in the first episode when we were doing the cliff diver roller coaster, monetizing the area as much as I can. I'm not entirely comfortable with where this is kind of sitting. It's blocking the view of the drop, but at the same time it's the perfect monetization opportunity because everyone's going to look in this direction, so it's a bit of a juxtaposition. But I'm going to use the same technique here in the sense that I can't cover this path, I can't make this path usable, so I'm just going to hide it with an unusable game stall just so it looks like it's real. And then you've also got the Planko playable ones that are beside it just to give it a bit of function, a bit of substance. I've started to do the curb work all along the pavements now, and I've just put the steps in, and I've used the same steps as the ones that are over here, so this is consistent. And I've just put the curbing along the side, and I've chosen the thick curbing that I used in Colwell Wonderland rather than the thinner curbing that I used in Arbor Valley. And then I've also started the process of re-walling all along here as well. So the existing wall that's here is now all along this side as well. So I'm sort of bringing in the original design along here, and I'll just refix this fence as well to match the side. And so that's everything that's happened for this update. So the next update, I think we're going to see quite a lot of progress, and that'll be our penultimate update. So let's crack to that. Here we go. So it's time for your penultimate update then, and there isn't really a lot to update you between the last update and this update. There's more cosmetic changes, but I know that in the previous episodes I haven't really done this sort of an update, and you get a massive jump between the update and the finished product, and then we just go through all of the stuff, but sometimes you miss some things. So I just wanted to do the update before I start the foliage and the fine detail bits that I do in this area, because it's ready for that now. It's ready for that homeward stretch. And so I've just started to do all of this work around here just to clutter up everything. So we've got the electric box in, we're starting to put the signage in, so I'm starting to get a feel for how that backstage area is going to look. And I've used the mop bucket again. I love this mop bucket so much, it's so good. So yeah, it's just, it needs that element of further clutter just to give it that backstage feel, but I'm now starting to flesh that out a little bit. and then I've just put some pipes in to represent that this would be some kind of a water pump area, and you'd find your electric stuff within here and everything. I've also started to make the water move a little bit as well, so I know that we don't have the ability to have it like lapping over the edge, so I've just done it as if it's a consistent flow. It just gives the idea of water moving, and this is kind of where I miss some of the elements of Planet Zoo's particle effect foliage and everything, because the reeds in the lake would be awesome, and then the rapids foam that I've used in our previous Planet Zoo series would be good just to make water move on surfaces. But this is fine, you just all have to squint and just suspend your disbelief for a minute. It's the best we can do with what we've got, right? So the water's moving, that's all that matters. And I've also just started to do some of the detailing work within the station as well. So I started to put things like the fire extinguisher in, the compliance signs, like the no smoking signs. And this is a UK park, so anywhere that's an enclosed space the size of this sort of station would have to have that compliance no smoking sign, because we have a blanket ban on smoking in enclosed spaces right across the country. Whereas these ones wouldn't need that. Because it's not enclosed enough to be considered to be enclosed, it's just roofed off, but you've still got open sides. So that's why you've got no signs here, and that's actually something that I've not really considered with the other parks. I've just assumed that the other parks would be American, and I don't know what the relevant law is for the smoking laws over there. But because I know this is the British park, it would need your sign here. The photo booth, kiosk, whatever you want to call it, is coming together nicely. It needs its final detailing work, obviously, but I've just started to continue the theming and the elements that have been used in offices elsewhere in the park, just to make this consistent with the rest of the park. So you've got your computer, you've got your till here, so that's coming together quite nicely. The lake itself is now starting to come together with its foliage. Like I say, I miss the reeds from Planet Zoo. They're brilliant at bulking out lake and water areas where you can hide some of the water bulk, but I've done that quite nicely here with the foliage that we've got in Planet Coaster, and then there's just a couple of rocks underneath it, and I've just painted the terrain and put lily pads on the top just to make it believable that it's a water area that wouldn't necessarily move. It's just a pond area that has water drawn in and out. And I've also just included the pipes as well, just for that element of realism. You can't really see them unless you know they're there, but you've got the pipes that are here, and it would draw water from the lake. And there's also pipes underneath here, but you definitely can't see it now. I put the foliage in, but they're in here somewhere. Not important, they're in there, I promise. So I've just put them in just for my own peace of mind. But I've removed the other pipe that you saw in the earlier updates. That was just there for the sake of having it there. In terms of the shop kiosk and the game kiosk we've got here, then I just started to detail this out a little bit. Again, it needs just some final touches. It needs lighting and stuff in here, but it's now starting to come together. It's nice and believable as a games unit. And then we've got our actual functional ones that can be used, and like I say, I just need to work out how I'm going to do the front here. I've brought the fencing and everything all the way along here, so it's now making a bit more of a feature. And I've started this dappling work as well with the nature and the rocks, just to break up that rock. I know I mentioned that in the last update. Biggest change for this update is that this building is now pretty much coming together. Again, it just needs some detailing to it, but it's pretty much done as I want it. I wanted to keep it nice and simple, nice and wooden and western. Remembering that this isn't a new build, so it would have been built probably the late 80s, early 90s, along with this whole area, so you wouldn't have had the intricate details that we have today. So it's kind of like just try and stay true to that. And then I've just put the fence in with the Insanity Ride for the queue, so this has now got an actual queue. I need to decide what I'm going to do with the path. I don't think I want to keep it bright concrete because the rest of the park isn't, so it wouldn't be right that this would be a brighter area. I'd probably use the black paving slabs that we've got, I think. So anyway, that's the overview of the area coming on quite nicely. So for the next update, it'll all be done. So I think let's just cut to that, shall we? All right, so we've got a brand new Log Flume. Here's the before and afters. So we've got ourselves a brand new Log Flume, and this is kind of a bit of a different reel up in the sense that Adam had given us a park that had a completely blank Log Flume. We had free reign, complete blank slate to do whatever we wanted to do with this, as long as it was real and as long as it stuck to the original principles of the park. And I know that having the chat before this episode, the main principle of this is all about sightline. How does it look from the guest view? And I think we've managed to achieve that quite nicely here, in the sense that it opens up into a quite nice wide plaza. And you'll know that I'm already a fan of wide plazas from all of the other ones that I've done, because you can service more people and you've got a bit more freedom when it comes to your areas. And your main monetized area of this as well is all in front of you here, in the sense that you've got the restaurant over on the right hand side, you've got your game store and your photo store here. So you're monetizing the area quite effectively. It's not even a dead end area either. You can come round this way to the restaurant and down into the Dodgems. I was going to try and integrate the Dodgems area into this new Flume area, but I think, based on the rest of the park, this would then create too much of a super area. And I know that the original intention was this is supposed to be a bit left out. It's supposed to be a bit neglected as an area. So I wanted to keep that principle there, and I wanted to keep that alive. And when you look at the rest of the park as well, there's very much a focus that's been made on the guest sightline. How does it look from a guest view? And this is all the way through. So like from this entrance area where you've got the roller coasters in the background, I wanted to make sure that I stayed true to that. And so this is why this area has just got this obvious sightline of the most important parts of the ride, but the other parts, like the maintenance areas and everything, they're completely hidden, so you can't really see them from the guest view. But I've also just made sure that this area here is also a part of negative space. So the other thing that this park does really, really well, and we said it in the very beginning, is that it uses negative space very well. Like around here, for example, there's just nothing. And I think I said that it was effortless, and not in the sense of no effort had been put into it, but in the sense of it didn't need the effort, because the details are so obvious where there are details that your eye line is drawn to that, and so it brings out and makes that detail pop. And so I've tried to achieve that here as well, in the sense that we've just got this flower bed here that's nice and open. It's got a bit of colour to it. It adds a bit of variation to the greys and the greens and the whites that we've got. It just adds that pop of colour, but it's also open, so that from here you can still see the Log Flume from all of the ways round. And then you walk into the plaza area, and then you are just immersed in the Log Flume. And then because this drop is below the ground level, you're then almost promoted. You're eager to go and explore what's actually down here and what it looks like. So the whole guest is then drawn down to this area, and this is where you start to see the drop, and we've made a feature of that drop. If I then wanted, just change the camera, if I then wanted to go and get something to eat, then I can come over here, grab something to eat, and I can sit on the benches and just carry on watching this drop. And I think this has now come together really, really nicely. It's now rounded off quite nicely. It's sort of framed off by all of the vegetation, and the pond looks like it's natural, but also looks like it's man-made at the same time. It's got that juxtaposition, in the sense that the rocks are around it, and then you've got the vegetation and everything that's hidden it. And these are just trees sunk into the ground. There's nothing really trickery about it. They're just the Brazil nut trees and stuff that's just been sunk. But it just creates this really awesome sightline from here as well. It's not obvious that it dips down until you actually look into the pond and you realise that it really does dip down. And then the flume just goes round the back here, and you just lose it completely. So you know that there's a splash here, and it comes around and then back up into the foliage. But other than this bit here, you then just lose it completely. So you then have to go and investigate elsewhere. And then you can turn around and you can see the Insanity ride, you can see the restaurant, and if there is then anything that's put in this back area here, this bit is open enough then to have that as a sightline as well for whatever coaster or ride or area or whatever might be put in here. And you might then consider making this the through path from this point. You just remove that fence and have your guest flow going down that way. So that's sort of how that's opened up. In terms of the detailing that I've done then, it's been mainly like the finer touches. So photo booth is just, again, it's your typical photo booth. I kept this one really simple again. I didn't want it to be too overzealous as a photo booth. It just needs to represent it, remember. We know that as a style by now, so there's your photos, there's your ride photos. The one thing I didn't show you though was this little tip. So on the others I'd almost put like the entrance of and the doorways and everything somewhere obvious, but here I put it along the side, and then on the inside you've got the door that corresponds to it. Now I can't do anything with the fact that the door knob is the wrong way, but at least it's got that element of realism. I could have sunk the door into a gap by using some kind of pieces, but I just decided not to. Just no point, is there? Two doors back to back work just as well. In the station then, I've just put the life rings around. I've put a couple of wet floor signs around. You tend to find that. I think you'd probably have a static wet floor sign rather than a carry one, but it's, you know, it's a wet floor sign. It needs to be done. And then I've just put the remain seated signs, and I've dotted these remain seated signs throughout the ride as well, so that we've just got a reminder that you need to stay seated. And then the life rings have been added. I've finished up as well all of the ride area signs. Again, these are all compliant in distance for the UK, so if you ever want to see this in action, go and have a look at the Google Street View for Log Asleep, and you'll see that they are placed every 8 metres along the fence. And I think there's one point I spotted 6 warning signs in the one shot, and 4 of them were the danger, keep out signs, danger of death, no swimming, that sort of stuff. I've just put some fences up here as well, just to stop people from falling into the gullyway, and I didn't do any more to the water here. It's just believable that the water's lapping over. Let's just squint and believe. Down here then I've sort of tidied this up a little bit more, put some no swimming signs, a couple of life rafts, and this has come together quite nicely actually. This is very representative of what you would see at the bottom of a flume. Again, I think this is probably a bit too wide, it's probably a bit too in your face, but we're working with the size of the pieces, so this has come together quite nicely. I think it's like got the grid, the grate for the water to come over. I wish we could remove the sides of here and increase the sides of the other side as well, because you tend to find that along corners and everything they would raise the sides, so it's a bit of a more of a flume effect, you know, swimming pool, and then lower this side so that the water can lap over and back into the pool. But it's fine. Again, you just have to squint and suspend believability, don't you? To suspend your realism. So that's what we've done there. I've just sort of put this in just to give that facsimile of it almost. It's believable enough. And it looks quite good actually from the ride view as well. So when you come down here, it's pretty much what you'd see. Water lapping over into some kind of a grid and a grate, and then going up the lift hill. So it's looking good. This bit here with the backstage area, I've just cluttered it up. I haven't done too much. They would probably want to keep this quite clear, so I've just put some pallets in, just some overturned stuff and some bins and whatever, just to give it that bulk out. It's quite consistent actually with how the other backstage areas are looking. Adam's kept the backstage areas here quite clear look, so I wanted to follow that suit. I didn't want this just to be a needlessly messy area. And then you've got your foliage on your actual channel as well, and I like how this has turned out. So again, these are just the trees, the bigger trees that have been sunk into the ground just to flesh it out, and it just looks like they're a bit hedge. Then I've just used the roses just to dapple some colour in, just to give it a little bit of site variation. And then I've also varied the terrain as well to make it look like that this retaining wall is serving a purpose. And this looks really good. I quite like this view, and it's just how it comes, the autosave, how it comes down the channel and then through and past the maintenance area. It looks good. It looks good. And then our path covered in the queue line, they've come out really well now that we've got the foliage in. It's got this shaded area, and then the rest of the trees are creating enough dappled shade for the rest of the queue. Then you've got your escape points, so these have come along quite nicely. So you've just got an obvious channel, and then it comes to an escape point, and this kind of figures that if you have a breakdown and the boats are backing up, you would have an escape point all along here where you can then come out into the queue line or whatever. I don't know whether there would need to be some kind of a barrier along here. Again, thinking UK health and safety head, I'd probably consider putting a barrier along here. I haven't done, but it was a close call. I left it just because it opens it up quite nicely. It opens up into the lake here. Game store wise, then all I did was just put some people in. Didn't do really much else to it. It's just the idea of it being a game store, and as you already know, it's just covering path that doesn't work. So you already know that I don't like spending a load of time on things that aren't actually playable in the game. So this just represents a game stall, and then you've just got your games that are playable here as well. So yeah, so that's the area. It's sort of looking good from all sightlines that you can imagine. I'm quite pleased with how this has turned out as well. This sightline here is awesome. This turned out really nicely, and you can watch the boats coming down and splashing, and then coming round, and you can sort of chill out and do what you need to do. And then from here you can then also watch the Insanity ride if that's what you prefer to do. So that's the area. The Log Flume doesn't have a name. None of the rides, in fact, I don't think the park has got a name. So you're free to name this however you feel. And there's no ride sign, obviously, so you just need to create it. And then I've just put the graveyard of the buildings that we didn't use and buildings that I moved at the back. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this episode, guys. Thank you so much for your time. As you already know, every interaction helps the YouTube algorithm. So whether you like, you comment, you subscribe, whether you dislike, that all helps everything. So thank you so much for your interactions, and I will see you for the next one. Until we speak again, keep yourself safe. Take care now. Bye bye.